You didn't find this video by accident. That's not a mystical claim, it's a practical one. The fact that you're here watching this on this specific day tells me something about you that most people around you right now don't share. It tells me that you've been paying attention, that the past several weeks have registered in you as something more than background noise, that the weight of the retrograde period, the emotional depth of the Pisces energy, the particular quality of stuckness that has been running through your life in some form, you felt all of it. You didn't just endure it, you felt it. And that sensitivity, that attunement to what has been moving through this period, is exactly the capacity that makes today, March 24th, available to you in a way it isn't available to people who weren't paying attention. Because here is what is true about where you are right now. 5 days ago, the Pisces new moon arrived and reset the emotional foundation of the current cycle. 4 days ago, Mercury stationed direct and the equinox turned the seasonal balance, and the sun moved into Aries, and the new astrological year began. And in the days since, something has been gradually, quietly becoming available in the specific circumstances of your life that was not available before those shifts occurred. A clarity that is returning, a momentum that is building, a sense, perhaps subtle, perhaps still fragile, but present, that the things which were stuck are beginning to move. Today is the day to stop treating that sense as fragile. Today is the day to trust it enough to act on it, not because the energy will disappear tomorrow, it won't, but because the particular quality of aligned, post-reset momentum that is available right now, in these first days of a new cycle still carrying the concentrated force of its beginning, has a peak. And you are close to the peak right now. What you act on today reaches further than what you act on next week. What you begin today roots more deeply into the new cycle than what you begin next month. What you say today lands with a clarity and a directness that the ordinary complexity of the weeks ahead will gradually make harder to access. This message is specifically for you, and it is asking you today to take one honest step. The past several weeks have been doing something to you that is worth naming clearly before talking about what today is offering. The Mercury retrograde period, which ran through most of this month, created the conditions for a very specific kind of interior work, the kind that most people avoid because life rarely slows down enough to make it impossible to outrun. But the retrograde slows things down. It creates the particular kind of obstruction that forces your attention inward. And in that inward turning, if you let it, it shows you things. It showed you the pattern running underneath the surface of your choices. The one you've been making the same way, in different circumstances, for long enough that you stopped experiencing it as a choice and started experiencing it as simply how you are. The retrograde, with its particular clarity about what has been unresolved and what has been repeated and what has been avoided, interrupted that automatic quality. It put the pattern in front of you and said, "Here, look at this. What do you want to do with this information?" And the Pisces new moon that arrived last Wednesday did something complementary to that. Pisces is the energy of deep emotional honesty, of the dissolution of the stories we construct to make our choices feel more reasonable than they sometimes are. In the days surrounding the new moon, the comfortable narratives have been softer than usual. The self-protective explanations for why things are the way they are have had less structural integrity. The truth underneath the managed version of the truth has been more visible, more present, more difficult to pretend you haven't seen. You have been through a genuine and demanding period of honest interior reckoning. And you may not have gotten everything out of it that it was offering. Very few people do, because the full offering of a retrograde period is more than most people are able to receive in a single pass. But you received something, some piece of honest clarity about your own patterns, your own desires, your own life as it actually is versus how you've been explaining it to yourself. That piece of clarity, however large or small, is yours. And today is the day it becomes usable as something more than an insight. Today it becomes the ground from which you act. Here is what March 24th is specifically offering that yesterday and the day before that were also offering in slightly different degrees of concentration. It is offering the experience of what it feels like when conditions that were aligned against your forward motion become aligned with it instead. Think about a specific area of your life that has been stuck. Not abstractly stuck, specifically stuck. A conversation that needed to happen and kept finding reasons not to. A decision that should have been clear and remained frustratingly foggy. A direction that felt right but couldn't quite gather momentum. A relationship that needed something from you that the retrograde period made you afraid or uncertain or unready to give. A beginning that was prepared for but not yet initiated because the initiating energy was moving backward rather than forward. Now feel what it would mean for that specific stuck thing to start moving. Not in a dramatic way. Movement in real life is rarely dramatic, but in the quiet, ordinary, undeniable way that real forward motion actually shows up. The person responds. The clarity arrives. The first step reveals the second step. The conversation opens. The decision becomes obvious enough to make. The beginning begins. That quality of movement is available around that specific stuck thing right now. Today, in a form that the retrograde was actively preventing for the past several weeks, and that the new year is now actively supporting. The conditions that were working against it have shifted. The current that was running against you has changed direction. And the forward motion that was impossible under the previous conditions is, under the current ones, not just possible but actively encouraged. What does that mean practically? It means that the action you take around that specific stuck thing today will meet less resistance than the same action would have met last week. It will find more receptivity than it would have found during the retrograde. It will land differently, more clearly, more completely, more in contact with what it was trying to communicate or accomplish than it would have in the backward flowing energy that has only recently ended. This is the window. This is today. And the specific stuck thing in your life that came to mind when I described it, that's the one the window is open for. There is a practical action available to you in the hours ahead that uses today's energy precisely and immediately. And I want to describe it in a way that makes it feel as accessible as it actually is, because the tendency when receiving information about windows of opportunity and aligned conditions is to make the required action feel large, to assume that the moment requires a proportionally large response. A big decision, a bold declaration, a dramatic move. The action available to you today is almost certainly much smaller than that. And its smallness is part of what makes it so powerful. Because small actions taken at precisely the right moment with precisely the right quality of honest intention travel further than large actions taken at the wrong moment from the wrong place. The action is this. Identify the one thing in your life right now that is most ready to move and most in need of the first step being taken. Not the most dramatic thing, not the thing with the highest stakes. The thing that is most ready. The one where the clarity has been arriving, quietly, over the past few days since the retrograde ended. The one where you have known, somewhere below the part of you that hedges and deliberates, what the next step is. The one that the retrograde was pointing you toward throughout the entire period of its backward motion, and that has been waiting, with the patience of something that knows it will eventually be moved for the conditions to shift. Find that thing, hold it clearly in your awareness, and then take the specific, concrete, smallest possible first step toward it today. Send the message. Make the call. Write the first sentence. Say the thing out loud to the person who needs to hear it. Sign up for the thing. Book the appointment. Show up for the conversation. Make the decision, and then act as if it's made rather than continuing to act as if it's still under consideration. The step itself is less important than the quality of honest intention behind it. A step taken from the honest, retrograde-informed, post-reset place that you are currently occupying. A step that comes from genuine clarity about what is needed and genuine willingness to move toward it, is a step that the current energy of the cycle will carry further than its external size would suggest. You know what the step is? The part of you that has been paying attention to this period, that felt the retrograde's weight and received the Pisces new moon's depth and arrived at today carrying some genuine clarity about your own life. That part of you knows exactly what the first step is. The deliberating part may still be discussing it, but the knowing part already knows. Take the step the knowing part is pointing toward. Something specific is happening in the lives of people who are paying attention in these days following the major shifts of March 19th and 20th, and it is worth describing so you can recognize it when it arrives in your own experience. Things that were stuck are becoming unstuck in the particular way that things become unstuck after a long obstruction, suddenly, and in a way that makes the original stuckness seem almost inexplicable in retrospect. A conversation you'd been avoiding finds its opening through a seemingly random occurrence. A decision that felt impossible to make resolves itself through a piece of information arriving from an unexpected direction. A person you'd been thinking about reaches out with the kind of timing that makes you feel briefly convinced that the universe has a sense of humor. An opportunity that seemed to have passed reveals itself as still present, slightly reframed, arriving through a different door than the one you'd been watching. These things are real, and they are happening in the lives of people who use the retrograde well, who did at least some of the honest interior work the period was asking for, who arrived at the new cycle carrying more self-knowledge than they had when the retrograde began. And for those people, the unsticking is not random. It is the logical consequence of the alignment between internal clarity and external conditions. When you become clearer inside about what you actually want and why, the external world has a way of responding to that clarity with information and opportunities that it couldn't offer while the internal picture was muddled. You may have already experienced a version of this in the past few days. Something that felt stuck showing signs of movement. A conversation finding traction. A situation that felt opaque becoming legible. If you have, that is not coincidence. That is the new cycle operating through the specific circumstances of your life, responding to the clarity you earned through the retrograde period and delivering it back to you in the form of external movement. And if you haven't experienced it yet, if things still feel largely as they felt during the retrograde, and the momentum has not yet arrived in a clearly felt way, then today is the day to create the conditions for it. Not by waiting for it to find you, but by acting from the clarity you have toward the thing that is most ready to move. Because the external unsticking tends to follow the internal action. The conversation opens after you reach out. The opportunity surfaces after you take the step. The clarity arrives after you make the decision. The movement in your outer life follows the movement in your inner life, and the inner movement is yours to initiate. Today is the day to initiate it. There is a version of this message that most people hear and respond to intellectually. They register it, they appreciate the urgency, they agree in principle that they should act, and then they return to the ordinary rhythm of their day without having done the specific thing the urgency was pointing toward. And then a week passes, and 2 weeks pass, and the window that was open when they heard the message has narrowed, and the action that was easy in the window requires more effort outside it, and they wonder why the clarity they briefly felt didn't produce the change they briefly sensed was possible. I want you to be the version that doesn't do that. Not because the stakes are catastrophic if you don't, they aren't. The new cycle will continue regardless, and the opportunities it contains are numerous and ongoing, and missing this specific window doesn't close the year. But because you came here today for a reason. Something in you is ready for what this period is offering in a way that the intellectual appreciation response would leave unaddressed. Something in you has been doing the work of the retrograde seriously enough that today represents a genuine inflection point, a moment where what you do determines whether the honest interior work of the past weeks produces something real in your life or simply produces clarity that travels nowhere. The action available to you today is the bridge between the interior work and the exterior result. It is how the clarity the retrograde produced becomes actual change in your actual life. And it requires nothing from you except the willingness to take it, which is always, in every moment of genuine inflection, the one thing that is entirely and only yours to provide. The conditions are aligned. The window is open. The step is clear to the part of you that has been paying honest attention. All that remains is the choice to take it. March 24th will not be remembered as a significant date in the way that March 19th and March 20th will be remembered. It has no announced cosmic milestone. It will not feel, from the outside, like a pivotal day. And that is the last and most important thing to understand about why today matters. The announced days, the new moon, the equinox, the planet changing direction, those days shift the conditions. They create the new terrain. But the ordinary days immediately after them are when people either walk into the new terrain or stay in the old one. When they either use the conditions that have shifted or return to the habits that were interrupted by the shift and resume them as if the interruption produced nothing. You are standing in the new terrain right now. The retrograde is over. The new year has begun. The Pisces new moon has reset the foundation. The forward current is running. The conditions are the best they have been in weeks, and in some specific areas of your life, the best they will be for the foreseeable future. What you do today, in these ordinary hours, with the clarity and the momentum that the extraordinary days of last week created, that is what determines whether the extraordinary days produced extraordinary results in your life or simply extraordinary moments in the sky. You have been paying attention. You came here. You received this message. And somewhere in you, as you've been watching this, something has been confirming what you already knew about what the next step is. Take it today, before the ordinary week reclaims the moment, before the deliberation that follows action replaces the action itself, before the window that is open right now begins to narrow in the way that all windows narrow with the passage of time. The clarity is real. The momentum is here. The step is yours to take. Take it today.